And we are officially live with the November Fireside Chat, which is crazy to think that we are already this far in with 1 month left in 2024. But welcome to those of you who've joined us live today. Today we're going to be talking about something a little different and benchmarking to increase your operational efficiency. So I have a couple of wonderful panelists here. We are only 45 minutes today, so I want to get us started. And we'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves. Larry, can I start with you?
Hi, Becky. How are you?
Hi, I am wonderful.
So I am the founder and CEO of MSP CFO. We are a business analytics company, business intelligence, strictly for the MSP space. We've been selling our product for about 10 years now. So I'd like to think we've learned quite a bit about the success stories and about how people are effectively using data to make improvements to their business. That's anything else you need, or is that?
No, I think that was good. I cannot believe you've been in the space for 10 years and that I've had the honor of knowing you that long. That's crazy.
You're one of the kindest people to me when I first started out, a scared little child at that horrible hotel in Denver. By the old airport.
The funny thing was I was only about a year into the space at that point, so I was equally scared. I was still trying to figure out exactly what in the world I was doing. But yeah, that was a terrible hotel. Kevin, you missed
when the water went out?
No. Worse. This was about 2 blocks away from Murderville. So it was a very dangerous part of Denver. So you were good if you stayed like on the hotel grounds, but you couldn't leave the property to even go for a walk. It was kind of crazy.
This must have been pre-2017.
2014, yes. I think it was.
Yeah, it would have been.
By the old airport.
Yes. Those of you from Denver would know what we're talking about. Kevin.
Yes.
Would you please?
Awesome. I'm Kevin Poole. I'm one of the owners and CTO of First Column IT. We are a Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia-based MSP. I've been in business for a little over 20 years, about 40 or so employees.
Thank you. Thank you for joining today. Yes, and you use benchmarking. Perfect. You are the perfect candidate for today then. Awesome. And so if we can go ahead and start our poll here, we wanted to get us started today with a little bit on what KPIs you're measuring out in the audience. So if you can take a second to answer that, we'll get moving a little bit. And so you've got 4 to choose from there, and that will just kind of give us an idea of some areas to branch into for the day. But knowing that there's some differentiation there between internal and external benchmarking. Larry, we talked a little bit yesterday. Can you kind of break that down for us? What would be the differences between those?
Sure. So internal benchmarking, I mean, if an oversimplification of it would be stack ranking, where you look at only your book of business, only your engineers, only your agreements, only your projects, whatever you want to measure, and find out which ones are better or worse than ones within your portfolio of whatever it is you're measuring. And the benefit of doing internal benchmarking is if you compare yourself to the industry, you might be doing something very differently. You might be categorizing data differently. You might be in a different model. You might have different different verticals you service. So when you do external benchmarking, we do internal benchmarking, all of that falls away, and you really know you're comparing yourself to other people within. And it's really useful in finding the outliers, listen, this is how I do my business. And there are a couple of companies that are, either too profitable, however you're measuring it, or too unprofitable. Or if it's an engineer, they're inefficient, they're not putting enough hours, or they're working 120% and are going to burn out. So you really can measure among your book what you want to focus on to find improvements. And what we have found from our work over the years has been that if you focus on your bottom 5 or 10% of your business, whatever you want to measure, you can get a really outsized return on improving your business. And on the top 10%, people think those are the great ones. Well, if you look at engineers, those are the people you want to protect from burning out. If you look at clients that are hyper profitable, these are the ones you want to prevent from putting you out the bid because they think that somebody else can make less margin off of them. So that's a real benefit of internal benchmarking. External benchmarking, and there's some fantastic that people know about tools out there like Service Leadership, where you'll say, these are the margins. This is what people in my industry are doing well. Why am I not doing as well as they are? And again, you may have reasons But over the long haul, you really need to look at them objectively and say, am I doing something differently, or is there a real opportunity or real knowledge that I can get to do as well as they are?
And so, Kevin, thinking back to your journey of benchmarking, I'm guessing you started with internal?
Yeah, absolutely. Our data wasn't necessarily perfect, and our projects weren't bucketized properly. So yeah, I'll just give you a quick recap. But essentially, we joined the Evolve peer groups, which was HTG, in 2017, and we started learning about the value of important data and being categorized properly for your cloud, your third party, your Office 365, having different margins, all projects, whatnot, if you're still doing time and materials versus, agreements. And so I started internally benchmarking clients against clients, and we had probably 5 clients that I thought, from my ConnectWise reports and from some of the custom reports I had downloaded, they look pretty bad, but I don't know how bad they are, and I don't have a lot of confidence. But we know we need to do something. And actually, it's funny that Larry's on this call. This is when I met Larry, an MSP CFO, and I'll just chime in. That's been one of the most useful tools for internal benchmarking that I've used for comparing internally. But what we did with it is there's a segments report where it shows, the most profitable 20%, and then the next 20%, and then there's 5 categories, and then the least profitable 20%. And so once we implemented and looked at our data, these 5 clients that I thought were pretty bad, I realized, well, gosh, first off, they're not the only ones that are bad. There's others that have gone under the radar. But one of them, for example, was a smaller client. We were charging them about $2,700 per month, and they loved us. But we said, wow, look at the margin in comparison to our average client, which is in the middle of that, those 5 segments. And so we went to them and we said, hey, we love working for you. We know you love us. We do a great job. We asked them those questions first. And we ended up increasing their monthly, MRR 2.5 times in 1 month. And they love us. They're still a client to this day, and they're profitable. Wow. It's wonderful. So that was a win. And then we went to another one who was about $7,000 a month. And we thought we were losing a lot of money on them. And we said, we have to increase you to a minimum of $9,500. And they said, we don't like this. We said, I know, but we're losing money. And in this case, they weren't on a contract. They were month to month, so we could do it, alas. And we ended up losing them 6 months later. Now, even when we increased them, we were still losing money. So it was a win. Those resources, technical resources are actually hard to find. And so if you're losing money on a client, even if it's $9,500 a month, you don't want that client. And so what we did is we said, some companies rip the Band-Aid and go through and fire all their not profitable clients when they start doing benchmarking. And we said, we're not going to do that because it's not treating the customer right. It's not caring for them. It's not good for our reputation, and it's probably not good financially. And so we actually slowly went through the worst 10 or 15% every year over 5 years and fixed all of them. And we ended up only losing maybe 2 or 3 along the way and gaining a lot of margin. So our EBITDA went from healthy to extremely healthy. So that was how we started internal benchmarking. Now it was a long answer, but
no, that was perfect. So that has to be a tough conversation to have with some of those customers of, hey, we're losing money on you, and their businesses though too. They understand margin, but it took you 5 years to get all of that squared away.
And when we started the process, I actually sat on the airline next to another MSP on the way to my Evolve peer group meetings, and we kind of started talking about right sizing clients and fixing if the margin's not right. And he said, oh yeah, we just went through this with all our customers, and we ended up firing 30% of our customers in 1 month. I said, what? Oh, and he said, it's so great, it's so amazing, but we felt that would be bad because the ones that didn't work out, we actually referred to other IT companies. And we said, we think these are reasonable quality, smaller IT companies. They'll take care of you. And we don't think, we're the best fit because the pricing doesn't work for us. So it's a hard conversation, but you can do it well, and you can honor the person and take care of them. And we always say it needs to be win-win. We're a strategic partner. If we're losing money long-term, this doesn't work. And if we're making too much on you, you're going to leave us. And we don't. So we want to balance this contract where we have a target margin. And only if you love us can this work. If you don't love us, you should find another provider, and we can refer you some that we think would work well. So it's tough, but you do it slowly and with honor. And we never threatened. We didn't say, hey, we're going to cut the keys in 30 days. We said, hey, you need to find a new provider. We'll give you time. We're not going to just yank support, but this isn't working. And so that's another way to, because your reputation matters more than some margin dollars, and how you treat people. So
I like that. You kind of did a mutual breakup versus firing.
It's not you, it's me. Yeah.
But that's still, especially when you live and work in the community that that your MSP is in, that's your reputation locally is how you get new business. That's so. When you're talking internal benchmarking, do you share those numbers with everyone in the company? Like, I know some MSPs have leaderboards and all sorts of things that kind of show how people are doing against each other for some healthy competition, but I've heard mixed reviews on that.
So we share service metrics on clients for team leads and service managers to be aware of. And yes, we do share metrics on how many tickets, like for the help desk department, this whole department, you can see on the TV on the wall how many tickets each person closed. But we also, we remove those who shouldn't be on that. For example, people taking complicated tickets shouldn't be compared to the people taking password reset tickets, because one's going to have 15 in a day and one's going to have 4 or 3. And it's just not fair to them. But we know that the 4 or 3 were really complicated and they did a great job. And so, but yes, we absolutely show metrics, and there's a difference between the financial and the service side. And, service margins are probably what you'd want to show versus actual EBITDA dollars or that kind of stuff for, or end dollars. Service gross margin is what your service managers and leads should be looking at for clients.
And to that note, Larry, we talked a little bit yesterday about the importance of apples to apples data comparison. And it sounds like that's just as important when you're talking internal metrics as external.
Absolutely. It's funny that this is a topic that comes up a lot now, especially when people start talking about using AI. And it's true even before you get to the level of using LLMs and using AI and using models, is you have to have clean data. One of the things that always bothers me is people miss the trees for the forest. They say, as a whole, I'm doing well, but within that, you should know this type of ticket, you're doing a little slower than other people. Or the only way to know that is to have proper type, subtype, and item. Exactly to Kevin's point, a person has a kill rate on password resets that is just, they look like a rock star. That's because they're easy tickets. And the person that has to, rebuild machines or find, corrupted files and rebuild around that, that's really hard work. But they're going to close fewer tickets. If you look at ticket kill rate, one's going to look good, one's going to look bad. And if you rate somebody only on that, you're not going to reward the person who's developed all the years of experience to be able to handle the longer, complicated tickets. You're also, on top of that, you're going to have a mad scrum looking for people to jump on password resets. Hey, I closed 6 of them. And people are just waiting for the next one to come in. So yes, it absolutely matters what kind of trees are in the forest, to sort of tease out that metaphor.
Yeah, I'll just comment on the item subtype real quick. For example, I pulled up a metricing platform yesterday to look at what is our highest. Now, we don't have all the types and subtypes defined, as a couple hundred employee company might have, but we've got the big ones, and what I found was our highest number was new workstation deployments. And I think over the last 3 months, we have 400 hours in that bucket alone. And then the second highest was new user creations, and that's 250 hours. And then the ones below that, Office 365 issues, printer issues, password resets, other things, email access, phones, they were considerably smaller in total hours, because some of them are really fast. But it made me think, this is why AI companies and RPA companies are all highlighting, you have the Roosts and the Pias and the ConnectWise RPA, and there's other players as well, but they're all highlighting an IMIBot, new workstation deployments, new user creations, automate this. Because if you have benchmarking, I didn't even know that was our highest usage, but our two highest things are the two highest usage of the industry as well. That's why they're highlighting that. And so benchmarking is critical to even know that to solve the problem.
Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to that is if you have every ticket listed as change me or select one, you can't do that. You can't sit there and say my new user installer is my problem, or my one client has too many VPN issues, so they might have outdated or hardware that doesn't really work for their networks. So not only are there people out there that are helping with some of these tasks, there are some great people out there, ConnectWise, Thread, Crushbank, many others. I think this is becoming a lot more prevalent. They're actually writing your TSI for you, your type, subtype, and item, so that you can make that kind of distinction, so that Kevin can go back and say, you know what, we're investing the lion's share of our time on new user installs, machines, people, that sort of thing. Let's be best in class on that, because our return on effort on fixing that discrete process is very high. If we're spending a certain amount of time fixing, let's just think of a bizarre one, fax machines. Let's not retrain and find new tools for fax machines, because we don't get that many tickets. A couple of doctors' offices I won't even get into how silly it is. They still use faxes. But you really need to know where you're doing the work. And data cleanliness is important for benchmarking, but it's important for every aspect of your business to be able to identify where you can get the biggest bang for your buck.
That's okay. So what should people be looking at? Like, if a business was just starting out benchmarking, what are a few key things that they should really, like, what are some easy wins in that? And like, where should someone even start?
Let me jump into that. So it kind of matters. And again, I'm going to lean on some IP from service leadership. It kind of matters what their operational maturity level is. If they don't have great data or great processes, they should look strictly internally, because they really can't compare themselves to the outside world, because there's not a standardization. They can kind of look to it as a sort of bright light in the distance they want to get towards, but not necessarily something that's going to tell them how to do their work. Good and bad clients, they should work on cleaning up their data, and then internal benchmarking. As they move up the OML scale, then you start looking for external benchmarking. You say, how are my margins versus everybody else? How long does it take me? The new user installs is one of my go-to examples. How long does it take me to set up a new machine? In research that we show is it should take the average, or the best in class, is about an hour. Other people are closer to 90 minutes. So if it's taking you 90 minutes and it's taking best in class an hour, what do they know that you don't? Have they implemented one of the RPAs that Kevin talked about? Do they have a standard new machine across all of their clients so that they don't have to relearn every time they do one? You then can focus on, what am I going to do about new user installs? But that you only get there once you're a little further along the OML scale.
Yeah, I think the first one that pops to head for starting, because there's going to be people on this call from all over. We're a little bit above an OML 4 if you know the scale, but there's some areas where we're not that high OML. But customer satisfaction, everyone should be having a gauge or a metric on that, so that you can get negative feedback. When a customer's upset, you can respond. And we aim for, I think it's above a 97% customer satisfaction, but we're thrilled when it's 98 or above. And I once saw an MSP who was fairly large. I think there were about 100 employees, and they advertised on their website 70% customer satisfaction rating. I was blown away. You're telling me that from every ticket you do, only 70% of the tickets they're happy with, 30% they're pissed off. That's a great. So everyone should be recording, but if it's not high, don't advertise it. You want to only advertise when it's in the 90s. Ticket kill is a big one, because if you're going to have the lagging indicator of your customer satisfaction will go down if your kill rate, how many tickets come in versus how many are closing. If that kill rate's not 100% or above, and you're consistently daily getting backed up, your customer satisfaction is going to drop, and you're going to have angry customers, and you're going to be missing SLAs, which, depending on the maturity of your platform, SLA tracking is a good thing, but there's a difference between responding to a customer saying, hey, we're going to work on the ticket, or hey, automated response, we received your ticket, versus actually starting. So sometimes MSPs, when they're early on in the journey, they have the metricing or the benchmarking change the SLA status when the auto response happens. And that's not a real, that's a fudge SLA. And so, you can't really record that unless you have a process that allows for you to track it properly. But total kill rate, total tickets you should be watching at all times. So you kind of have a gauge. Oh, we're really busy this week for some reason, or oh, it's a holiday week, so we're down, but be ready because next week's going to be busy when everyone comes back from vacation. Same day resolution is a metric that we watch because, and we talk about it in sales, it's helpful for that, and I'd recommend it because, if you close a ticket, that's great, but if you close the ticket and it gets reopened, that means you didn't close it right, and your quality of work is not phenomenal. And so if you can close it once and it not reopen because you solved the root, that's a more important metric. And we talk about that in sales. And then escalated tickets we watch, and if too many are escalating from a certain engineer or tech, is there training that's needed? Are they in the right seat? Are tickets being assigned, or are they in the bucket where they shouldn't be in that area? Priority 1 tickets for, hey, this is an emergency, it's urgent, or it's a VIP. How many of these are we getting? Because we label some of our bosses as VIPs, and without it being in the contract, we'll auto prioritize their ticket to make sure we keep them really happy because it's a profitable contract, or that kind of thing. And another big one that's when you first start is reactive time per endpoint per month, REM. And so, there's different ways to calculate this, but typically it's everything that is in your RMM. And then they usually add a metric for, I think, 50% more for phones and other devices that aren't counted officially. And you divide that. But there's a metric out there for it, but it's very important to watch because you'll know how your automation is doing and how noisy your environments are. And you can watch it per client. So these are some important metrics to us.
So I had a conversation recently, actually, at IT Nation Connect with an MSP who started using some training for users with high ticket volumes. So customizing some ticket training for, we keep noticing that Brenda in accounting is having this same problem over and over again. Do you guys use anything like that to kind of look through your tickets and comb for your high volume users who just might need a little bit of IT training?
We haven't thought about training, but we have actually gone to the point of contacts and said, hey, this user creates tickets about this same type of issue over and over. And, they may need to be routed internally, or you may need to talk to them about going through training. But maybe that's not a bad idea that we would offer some kind of online training. I wouldn't give them tech time for that, at least not more than the first time. But yeah, it's a good idea.
This was somebody who was using our security awareness training because has some LMS capability. And so they had just built out some training, and they were like, this is our process now, that with so many of this kind of ticket from one specific user, we'll remind them gently, essentially like a mini security awareness training of, you've got that person that clicks on something, instant training, similar concept. But
in the same way, if you have a client who has an employee that fails multiple phishing simulations, we will go to the point of contacts and talk to them about additional training. And we'll also kind of give them a warning in terms of, for their sake, hey, this employee seems to fail frequently, or if they've gotten phished in real life, and we'll show the examples and say they may be a liability for your firm or organization if something doesn't change. Now, we're not telling you need to fire them, but be aware we see it as a problem and a safety concern for your data, and you should be aware of it. And whether you put them in additional training yourself above and beyond the security awareness training, or whether you talk to them, or but we actually have that happening this week, even with one of our point of contacts. We're recommending that they do some in-depth discovery internally. So
that,
Yeah.
and we,
Becky, on that note, when you talk about having a single issue or a single client, it's about benchmarking and having the good data. First of all, you hope that your tickets are tagged with machines and users and not just the point of contact, so that you know where that's happening. One example that I always love looking back to is we had a client or prospect we were working with. We were just sharing with them the data, and they said, show me this one law firm. I know that it's unprofitable. And if you stack rank them, if you benchmark internally, it was one of their less profitable clients. So they wanted to go in guns blazing, raise pricing with something, a little confrontational. And they were, to Kevin's point, they would have been okay if they left because it wasn't a hyper profitable client. But when we looked at it and we took the next level of benchmarking, we said, well, if you look at it, they actually have more, desktop software, Office 365 type issues than other people. It's not so much that they're underpriced, it's that they're overutilizing you. And because they could benchmark how many tickets they expected on a certain type of issue, and they were a real outlier on that one, they said, you know what, we're not going to raise prices. We're going to do a bunch of lunch and learns. We're going to train them on how to use the software they have right now. And that made them a better client. To Kevin's point, I would argue firing should be your seventh option. You try your hardest to fix them. Because getting new clients is not easy. Mm-hmm. But again, if you benchmark and then re-benchmark and then re-benchmark and peel back the onion, you might find what the real outlier is that's causing the problem, where the source of the lesion is.
Well, data keeps you from making knee-jerk reactions and also from just following your gut that day, because I can imagine that there are those days where you think you're making the right call, but without the data to back it, like one person complained, that doesn't mean that your other 99 clients are unhappy with you. One person.
Well, I would actually go one step further. Not only does it prevent you from making knee-jerk decisions, it actually empowers you to make good decisions.
Gives you confidence. Yep.
Yeah. So we, as Kevin said, we segment clients for people, the bottom 20%. And let's say somebody's got 50 clients, so the bottom 20% is 10 clients. 5 or 6 of them they'll know about. 1 or 2 of them will be, this was a horrible issue we had to deal with that happens once in a while, and it just happened in this time period. It's fine. They're a good client. This was just a bad year. And then a couple were surprises. And my point of view isn't that I'm interested in the surprises, which is, there is an interesting aspect to it. It's the 5 or 6 they knew about and didn't do anything. That's the thing that really gets to me. And when you have good benchmarking, you can say, hey, you know what? There is an opportunity to do better. If you do it internally, what are we doing better elsewhere that we're not doing here? If you look at it externally and you have the confidence to trust the data, and I do emphasize that you should earn that confidence, what can we do better that the industry is already doing? I'm going to go to a conference and sit in on a session. I'm going to go talk to a vendor that does something. For example, I know that we're not going to talk about this directly. We've done studies about vendors, and we've shown that certain vendors can, we did this for Huntress to show that they reduce the number of security tickets if you use Huntress, not versus other security vendors versus not having Huntress. So the more you know about what can be a real solution, what is working for other people, either other people within your book of business or other people in the industry, then you can really focus on where your efforts are going to be to make an improvement.
Yeah, I'll comment on that. Even about having the right data is it utilization that's the issue? Is it pricing? Is it a certain type? When we went to our clients to talk about pricing increases or whatnot, I would actually bring the data and I would bring the report that showed other clients, and I'd blank out the client's name. So they saw the amount of hours, they saw the margins, they saw all the stuff in comparison. And I would say, all truthfully, I never made anything up. This was a new client we onboarded in the last few months, and they're gonna leave this category because they're brand new. This was one we just raised their rates, or we're talking to them next week. This is another new one. This is one that's going away in 2 months. And I would say no client can stay in this segment, at least not initially. You're always going to have a bottom 20%, but when you start, it's going to be a much worse bottom 20%. But I would show them if it was, hey, it's your pricing, or here's this utilization report where your hours per endpoint is 2.5 times higher the average of the other 4,000 or 3,000 endpoints, whatever it was at the time. And so your users are actually just using too much. And here's the type that they were working on. And so we need to work through this. but your pricing needs to go up too, because I would show both. So having that data gives you the confidence and bring the report. Just don't show the other clients' names. It's not helpful. But that was very beneficial to us to actually have the data to show them.
Well, it gave them the why, that you weren't just increasing their prices to, get better coffee in your break room. Like there was actually a reason, and to be able to show, these are other businesses that we do business with, and here's where you sit. Like there's some power in that level of honesty and openness. That's an interesting approach. So we talked a little bit yesterday, Larry, you shared a really good example about kind of the difference between benchmarking and financial goals or planning. It was the North Star piece.
Sure. So your financial goals are what you really want to achieve, and your benchmarking is what's going to help you get there. Like if again, going back to service leadership, they said that you should be, depending on the quarter, I think most recently it's close to 21% EBITDA margin. If you want to get there, the question is how. And I think with benchmarking, you may find that you are not doing as well with a certain product margin, or not, if you're selling cloud at a lower margin than the industry, or if you're slower to close certain tickets and you're investing more in your labor than the rest of the industry. If you want to achieve it, benchmarking is your North Star to find out where, and you're at the maturity level that you can trust it, to find out where you can make improvements to your business to make that happen. Benchmarking is a tool. Financial goals are an aspiration. So they are the tools to help you reach your aspirations, if you put it that way.
I like that. So there is a question in the Q&A section here. Can anyone provide a list of issues and sub-issues? Been trying to find ITIL approved lists, but they just don't define this. Thoughts?
So my view on this, we actually, it's funny. A couple of years ago, a few of us got together. A few data providers, I broadly consider myself in the data segment, a few consultants, and they said, let's get a standard list so that we can benchmark everybody and everybody can be working on the same page. And, going back to sort of the oldest of stories, it became a Tower of Babel in the sense that everyone had a slightly different way to do it. We got 2 phone calls in and then the whole process collapsed upon itself. So if you want to do an ITIL list, that's fine. And our industry is pretty good. There's plenty of coaches and consultants that I would recommend working through to get that done. But what's actually happened over the past year or two is these AI tools. And again, this could be ConnectWise's Copilot, it could be Thread, it could be Crushbank. And again, there are many others, and I'm sure there'll be more in 6 months that will do it for you. And that's the right place to start. If you want to do it the same as everybody else, I think you're going to have a challenge getting one person, because if you talk to a second person, they'll tell you to do it slightly differently. So try to get it right for your business, and talk to one of the vendors, talk to some of the coaches or consultants. This is a known problem with processes for solving it, but a one-size-fits-all solution, I think, is tough to come by. Kevin, if you want to talk about how you got to yours.
Yeah, well, there's some easy to define ones, and then there's hard to define. When I was looking through our types and subtypes, we have one for performance issues, and that's wonderful to categorize, all these tickets into that. But there's Wi-Fi performance, which could be another subtype. There's CPU performance. There's Teams call jittery performance, which could be caused. So it's tricky. But actually, I don't know if everyone can type and see publicly, but I would recommend, if people want to go ahead and type in maybe your top 3 types or your top 5, and you can get a list, because that might be beneficial, because everyone in here is going to have an idea of a ticket they get a lot. Not the password reset is one. We know that. We don't need to see that one. But everyone's going to have a different perspective. And I bet there's tickets that we have in a certain subtype that we haven't identified that we should be having a full type for that. Because it has to, you start with the easy ones, right? The password resets, the new workstation setup, new user, Office 365, sync issue. They're all the easy ones. You do those, and everyone's got those on their lists. All the crush banks and PIAs and all those. But when you can expand and get really good data, that's when you can start to automate and use AI and robotic process automation to repair and find these the more detailed you can get, the faster you can resolve issues and less expensively. So essentially, one of our goals is to continue growing revenue and clients at a much higher ratio than amount of technicians to client endpoints that we have now. And with automation, that's very possible, but it requires type and subtypes. And we're doing those manually now with types and subtypes. We're assigning them manually, we're creating them manually. But if you partnered with an AI platform like a Crush Bank or a PIA or one of the others, they're going to have their own that you can add to. And so that might be a next step for us. But because ours already exist, it doesn't make sense to redo that at this point. We would integrate later. But yeah, if people want to list out their top 3 or top 5, I think that would be beneficial for everyone to see.
Well, one person has responded here. It looks like we've got SharePoint access issues or lost files in SharePoint.
The real one, yeah.
As someone who loses files on a regular basis, yes, I can see where that would be.
SharePoint sync issues would be another, OneDrive.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, audience, anybody else want to jump in here? I mean, you've got some awesome experts on here right now to even give us some ideas on other places to go. But so the data piece, knowing that, so if you're going to start benchmarking, are there any ways to ensure that you've got good data? Like, are there some data hygiene things that folks should be looking at as they start benchmarking?
Larry, what do you think?
So one of the problems that we always have, since we do work with everyone's data, is I never trust anybody when they say their data is awful or they say their data is wonderful. We've worked with, close to 1,000, not quite 1,000, but close to 1,000 clients over the years. And almost everybody who says their data is awful, it's good with some gaps. People who say they trust everything in their data, that's the one that you're a little bit more concerned about. So I like to put it into a system where we can look at it and actually assess it. So the short of it is, if you want to find out how good your data is, put it into a system, whether it's MSP CFO or if you want to dump it into an Excel or into a SQL database, into Power BI, test it and see if the output is what you think it would be. It's really an iterative process. We do have ways of grading data, but if people find novel ways that get outside of our grading scale to mess up their data. So I would absolutely recommend trying to look at it in the system and see if that system gives you the output they want, and then use that as a prescriptive possibility, a prescriptive method to say, this is what I need to fix. This is inconsistent. When you're benchmarking at all, the biggest issue you need is consistency. If you're doing two things the same and calling it something different, or do two different things and calling it the same thing, you can't benchmark. So I would say put it in some sort of system, look at it. If it passes the smell test, then proceed. If not, then take a hard look at what you need to improve.
Yeah, and I'll comment on that. So our data internally is not perfect, but I have my comparison points. So for example, our service gross margin overall is now right at what best-in-class companies are at. But the problem with that, which is wonderful, so happy that we targeted that. The problem with that is our EBITDA is much higher than best-in-class EBITDA. So where's the discrepancy? Do we have a cheap office? Are we paying the owners too little? Is something else? Do we not have a sales team that we're paying appropriately? Are we not bucketizing? And so our data is not perfect. So I like to use comparison data. So for example, if you use something like MSP CFO and you have your P&L for all clients, and you look and it gives you your blended your blended margin for both service and product and anything else you do for them, that number is not accurate in comparison to what necessarily is in our SLI data. And that's okay, because I'm using it as a comparison point. So if my EBITDA, let's just say my EBITDA is 25% overall for the company, and I'm comparing to a company that's 15%. So, I'm going to take, if I looked at their MSP CFO data versus mine, the numbers will be wildly different because my data is probably wrong. But I'm going to change that end margin, that blended margin, by 10% because their EBITDA is 10% lower than ours. And that's how I'm going to do a comparison of their data to ours, even though the data is not perfect, if that makes sense. And so I do the same for internal. I don't care what the percentage shows, based on my MSP CFO versus SLI, because I know what my EBITDA is. So I calculate my EBITDA difference from my blended margin difference. And then that's how I target with changing the customer's average location on their margin. And so again, our data is not perfect, but for comparison, it's very useful. And here's another one. Our W2 multiple has always been way too low. So, the industry would say, and it's supposed to be 2.5 or above for best in class, I think. Maybe it's 2.7. We've been at 2.1 and 2.2 for the last 4 years. So we're not selling enough for the amount of employees we have? Well, why is our EBITDA way higher than best in class? So it's not created equal for all people. Maybe we pay our people too well, but maybe that's why our customers are so happy, because our people never leave. There's all these different intangibles that you can't put in a benchmark, but when you're consistent with your data, like Larry said, then it's useful. So consistent with yours and improve it over time. And you can really compare with other companies as well.
And I have to believe too that that's part of where a peer group becomes really beneficial, because you have a trusted group of other MSPs to compare that apples to apples with.
Yep, absolutely.
With benchmarking, as with everything else, we say this often, good data, good benchmarking, good any kind of reports will only put you on second base. Like it's from a baseball analogy, you're in scoring position, but it's not a run. Like you have to finish the work. You have to say, why am I different? What can I improve? Is there a reason that we are structurally different that I'm okay with? Whether you do it externally, do we have a different vertical than other people do? Or if you do it internally and say, this is a new client, I'm okay with them being unprofitable for the first 6 months as we onboard and fix their systems. You need to sit there. You can't use it as an end result. It is not, you don't open a drawer and find a pile of money. What it is it will show you opportunities to do better. And then it then comes back to a thinking person saying, here's something I can act on versus here's something that really there's no actionable item to be taken. So I will move on and come back to it.
Gotta follow through. It's hard conversations.
Some of this would be very difficult conversations to have, and there's got to be a lot of self-reflection there. Like you can tell yourself you're great until you have to look at the data, and then there's got to be some key areas there that you can't really hide from as much.
And
so,
how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So one little. It's not one big step, that gets you there. It's 10,000 little ones you do over a couple of years.
Right, and I just gave a talk in Orlando with Rex, and one thing he always talks about when you show someone their data is going through the 5 stages of grief. And I'm not going to know them all off the top of my head, but the first one is denial. Like you're not going to believe the data is accurate, and the last stage is acceptance. And to rush that means you don't really fully get to acceptance. So let yourself go through, look at the data, deny that it's accurate until you get to the point where you can't deny it any longer. Be angry about it. Bargain. I think there's a missing one stage.
Yeah, you got anger, bargaining, denial, acceptance.
Whatever, you didn't get to accept it. And then you take the action. So there usually is a process. And don't cheat the process. Like if it takes you 6 months, allow yourself 6 months before or longer before you finally dive into doing something about it. Because I think then you'll believe where you are a lot more strongly.
And in a marriage of both of that, making those small adjustments means that you find what actually works. If you go in and you change everything, you have no control. You don't know what thing actually adjusted. So making those small changes, and it's also something that I know that entrepreneurs can struggle with is that I'm going to fix all the things. I'm going to chase all of them. And you could drive your whole team crazy doing that. And you also, you don't really know where you affected positive change.
Right. And then to that point, and I know that we're just about out of time, so I'll try and speak quickly. Going back to this concept of operational maturity level, if you start improving your business from a 1 to, if you're lucky enough to get where Kevin is above a 4, you're going to do some really big things, standardizing your agreements, documenting, making sure you have consistency amongst your engineers, all this great stuff. And, the data will show you go from an EBITDA margin of barely profitable, break even, up to like 3 or 4%, to bringing it close to 12, 13, 14, 15%. Best in class is still closer to 20. So what's going to happen then is everything that we're talking about, you'll pick up a quarter of a point here. You'll pick up a quarter of a point. It's baby steps. You're not going to find any low-hanging fruit that's going to add 5 points to your margin the way that restructuring your agreements and standardizing everything will. But once you get to the point where you're at 15% margins, it's just a series of continual improvements of baby steps. That benchmarking, I think, is tremendously helpful.
And okay, it looks like we have one question there for those of you who've hung on. Oh, did I miss it here? When you report on RIA, do you include time waiting on client?
Reactive hours per endpoint? No, the clock stops when you're waiting on the client. Okay. So the clock should stop on that, but I would recommend a workflow that will alert you to follow up with them, whatever you think is appropriate, but maybe it's in 2 days. I think ours might be 3 days, where if it's waiting on client, then it's going to alert us, hey, reach out again, call them, email them. So yeah, the clock stops.
Right. And there's also those 2 different measures. There's reactive hours, which is the amount of time your team spends working on it. And if your team is waiting for response, they're working on something else, that doesn't count. There's also time to resolution, which is time from ticket open to time that ticket closes. And that could be the client's fault, and you're kind of stuck with it.
Yep.
You can't track that time.
So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Larry, for joining today. Thank you, audience. Larry, your website, if anybody wants to look at more like how they can engage if they're ready to take some of those next steps.
Sure. It's www.mspcfo.com. We're happy just to have a conversation with data. We have a process where we let somebody do what we call a real demo, where they could feed their data. And if they don't sign up with this, but their only takeaway is that we can tell them what gaps of the data exist. We're fine with that. We'll do the call. We'll show you the data. We'll purge it when we're done if you don't want to move forward and part ways as friends. We're really just happy to help the community because I think it benefits everyone.
Yeah. And I have to take this opportunity to shout out my absolute, I love Huntress. We're a Huntress partner, but my favorite vendor who has made me the most money over the last 5 years or 6 years or 7 years now is MSP CFO. And we have made more money from MSP CFO comparisons and segments and confidence and the ConnectWise reports. Yes, they're there. And yes, there's some similar data. It is nothing like it. It would not, we couldn't have done it without it. And I just have to say that. Thank you, Larry. It's been awesome working with you and your team.
You're a very good partner. Thank you very much.
That's why, Larry, thank you for your time today. This was perfect. Kevin, as always, wonderful to see you. And
great to see you as well.
Yeah, we'll see all of you again in December for our next Fireside Chat. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks.